Hello and welcome back. By now you should have your paper gridded, your photograph gridded, and you're ready to start drawing your portrait. Our first step is to use our grid system to lay out the basic structures of our portrait. We're going to be doing a contour line drawing, and this part's really hard. If things don't look right, you have to leave it for now. And I'll show you in my drawing that I'm doing as a sample. One of the eyes is way off and everything in me wants to go in and fix that eye, but I'm gonna leave it and come back to it later. So I'm just gonna go one square at a time, drawing out the contours of the face. It's really important that you use your grid during this and you follow what you see in each square. Don't go into the dark temptation of freehanding it. There's a reason that we did the grid in it, so we can really break it down and look one thing at a time, get the size and the proportions of everything right, get the placement of everything right, the angles of everything right. If you don't use the grid, that's where you're going to make your biggest mistakes. Take your time, draw super light, and let those mistakes be. Our next step is going to go in and fix those, okay? Have some faith. You've got this. Take your time. Don't spend your whole time erasing. Just keep moving forward. For this step in the portrait drawing process, I need to have my reference photo, and you can either have it printed off like I do or you can have it on your phone. I like it printed and the letters and the numbers on it so I can match it with my piece. I also take 2 strips of paper and I make kind of a guide for myself. This big one's to be used on the large piece and the small one's to be used on my small portrait. I just lay one in line with the grid, lay the other the opposite way and tape it so there's 90-degree corners, and I do the same on my photo. I'm going to use a mechanical pencil or a graphite 2H pencil to do this next step. My goal on this next step is to use my grid to break down my drawing and get the basic contour line drawing onto my big paper. I need to do that super lightly and not be picky. I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to leave the mistakes for the next step, which is perfecting the contour line drawing. The purpose of using a grid is it allows us to just look one square at a time and really look at this piece, this photograph, as a series of shapes and lines and values and not as a person, because this isn't a person. This is just ink on paper, and this is going to be charcoal on paper. To make it look as realistic as possible, we need to have a great eye and notice the shapes of things. So I'm going to show you how to do that a little bit more close up. I'm going to do it one square at a time. So square 1A to 1B to 1C, and I'm just going to keep working my way down my drawing or photograph, and as I work down my photograph, I'll work down my drawing. If I am a right-handed person, which I am, I'm going to work upper left to lower right. If you're a lefty, I want you to draw upper right to lower left, and we'll do the same when we do charcoal. So we always go top to bottom and we move away from our hand with which we draw. That helps us not to smudge our drawings. If you get to a square like 1A that's blank, you leave it, you don't draw anything. Or if you can't see something, like I know the edge of Zoe's cheek is right here, but I can't see it, I'm not gonna draw what I can't see. I'm gonna tackle that later when I perfect my drawing. I've started the process of doing this basic layout on this big white paper here. And what I do is one square at a time, I just move over and then I draw as I go. You really want to look one square at a time. That's the purpose of the grid. It's make you focus on one thing at a time. So I've gone down through row 3 and now I'm in row 4. Row 4 starts to get a little bit trickier. So as I'm in row 4, got my guide here and my guide on my photo, and I'm trying to keep things in the same orientation, and then I'm going to move over one because there was nothing in A4, so now I'm on 4B, and I can see that there's some stuff happening in this space. Let me bring up my photo a little so you can see better. There is Zoe's eye on this page here. And if I look carefully, it's really hard to see the edges and the shapes in her eyes. So what I'm going to try to do is my very best to kind of show where this space is. And there's a variety of ways that I break down my square. The first thing I do is I notice where shapes come in and out of the square. So there's a shape that starts here, It's about a quarter of the way down, and another one that starts here about a halfway down. So I'm going to mark that same information on my square. So about a quarter and about a half, and I'm doing this all pretty lightly. Then I notice the top of this shape comes straight over a little towards close to halfway. So it'll come straight over towards halfway. A little short of halfway, it dips down. So I'm going to go a little short of halfway. I'm going to try to match that angle, okay? And then I've got this other shape here, this other line that comes down and away from that line and comes back. And I can't see where they start or stop. And I know this is an eye. And so the tricky part is telling my brain to just draw the shapes that I see. And that's what you want to tell your brain right now. Just draw the shapes that I see. If you don't see something, don't draw it. And if you can't tell where there's an edge, you leave it be. We're going to worry about making these look like eyes, nose, mouth, etc. and like they all belong together in our next step. So then I move over to the next square. In the next square, what I'm seeing is this shadow here, right? There's light, there's dark. I don't see any lines right here, so I'm not going to draw anything, even though I know there's lines there because that eye. But I'm seeing this shadow here. A lot of times my students want to make a nice hard edge where there's shadows, lights and shadows meet. Avoid doing lines where light and shadow meet. Instead, kind of leave it there. If you feel like you have to, it's really important to you, you can do a line, but make it super light, because in the end, that's not going to be a line. That's going to be some value variation there. But if it's something that you feel like you really need or it's super helpful, you can draw it in, just draw it really light. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep moving down. So here I've got another complicated shape, her other eye. I'm going to start to break this eye down into where it comes in and out of this square. And if it helps you to make another guide to cover up the other square around it, that can help you focus if you're really struggling to focus. So a third of the way down is where this corner of the eye is. So I'm going to find my third. The outside corner, the other place that line has a major change, is maybe a quarter of the way, about a quarter of the way in and a quarter of the way down. So about here. So I make another mark there, and it's just really light. I'm hoping that you can see it. Yeah, it picks up on camera. Really light marks there. And then I'm going to try to match this angle here. And I'm not drawing all the details of the eye. That comes much later. Right now I'm just trying to get the major shape of the eye structure. So I notice that the eye comes up and then it flattens out and then dips down, which is typical of an eye structure. You've got a deeper angle inside, outside, flattens a bit on the top. So I just need to do that in the right spaces. It also flattens a little bit below that top line. And then it swoops down, and I think it comes up just a little bit more here. My lower eye lid comes up a little bit, down, and then it comes up at an upward angle. And then I've got a circle for the iris, partly overlapped by the eyelid, and a circle for the pupil. And that's what I'm going to leave it at. I'm not going to go in and try to make it exactly perfect. And if I back up and I look at both eyes at the same time, they do not look great together. This eye is not right yet. This eye is much closer, but it's still not there, and it's missing a lot of details. I haven't done any value. I haven't gone in and fixed things that I know are wrong. I'm going to wait until I get all the facial features in. Because sometimes this will look wrong, but then I add the nose and the mouth, and all of a sudden I'm like, hey, actually it looks right. Or this will look right, and I add the nose and the mouth, and I realize that eye is wrong. So it's really important that we're just laying out the basic structures, and then once everything's in there, even if we know they're wrong, then we're going to go back and make changes. So do not make changes right now. Just let it be. Sometimes in class when we're in this step, I'll see a student erase their eye like 30 times, and they ruin their paper in the process. And it's hard to tell if that eye is right until, like I said, we have other things around it to reference. And we're just trying to get everything in the right place and the general right angle. The other thing to notice with eyes, if I look at Zoe, her eyes go up
at a slight angle if I lay my pencil across them, as does the nose and the mouth, because her head is tilted slightly this way. So don't straighten out your eyes, don't straighten out your nose, don't straighten out your mouth unless you're looking straight at the camera. What I'm going to do at this point is just continue to work through the drawing one square at a time, looking at where lines and edges come in and out of each square, the angles that they flow through each square at, and I'm going to try my hardest to not tell myself what I'm drawing. So right now I'm drawing an ear, right? This is the inside of her ear. Oh, you can't see that. Right now I'm drawing the inside of her ear. But really it's just a line. I'm just drawing a line. I'm trying to copy this line onto this paper and make the proportions fit the square just like they do in the original piece. And I'm trying my best to get it right, but you know what? I'm not freaking out about it. I'm not getting down on myself if it isn't perfect right now. It's gonna get better. I'm gonna look at it a little bit closer later. And I'm just going to keep going through. One note on hair, and students always ask, well, how do I do the hair? How do I draw the hair? One note on hair, you want to look for sections. This is a section of her hair. Do you see how there's kind of a significant line that goes through here? Here's another section, a third section. Here's the outer edge. Those are what you're drawing. I don't want you at this step to try to draw individual hairs. You're not drawing shadows. You're drawing sections. You're looking at those bigger sections. So here's a section of hair, kind of fans out. So as you get to each square when you're drawing the hair, well, that rhymed. As you get to each section that you're drawing hair in, you're going to be looking for that information, looking at how the hair flows through it, and then just drawing in if you're seeing any kind of sectioning happen. You're not worried that the hair is meeting up if you're looking at what I'm drawing here. The hair in one square is not exactly meeting up firmly with the hair around it. Again, we're going to fix that in the next step. When I come down to the next row, row 5, there's nothing to draw in 5A. In 5B, there's some information, but can we really tell what's going on here other than some shadows? No. I don't see any edges, so I'm not going to draw anything there. So now I move on to 5C, and here I've got some info. I've got the tip of my nose, and again, there's a little bit of a tilt to it. It doesn't go straight across the square. So I'm going to notice where shapes come in and out. So it's a little above halfway. This is, gosh, almost smack dab in the middle of my square. I think that needs to move up a little. This nostril, and I don't know if it's picking up in the camera, is about here. With noses, and I'm going to go over this more when we get to the part where we start to perfect our drawing. For noses, be careful not to enclose the nostril. So don't draw underneath the shadow here. Draw the bottom of the nostril here. Don't draw the shadow edge. And again, just draw what you can see. If you can't see it, don't draw it. And if it doesn't look right, don't freak out. We're going to fix it later, okay? You get the gist. I'm going to go through and finish laying out this drawing, and then I'm going to do the same on my brown paper. In the end, I'm going to take you through the drawing on the tan or the brown paper and kind of talk you through what I'm doing as I speed through that drawing, okay? Take your time, draw really light, and only draw what you can see. You remember, you're just drawing shapes and lines, trying to match one square at a time. I'm starting by setting up my guidelines, and then getting my guidelines for my photo ready. It can be really helpful to have an extra set of these as well. Now I'm lining things up and starting to draw the top of the piece. If you notice, I'm going left to right, one square at a time. You can see me referencing the shapes and the angles of things as I draw each square. So I study each square before I draw it. I notice where lines come in and out and the angles that lines produce through the square as they move. I also don't worry too much if my squares line up exactly, because I'm going to go back in and fix that in the next section. I'm trying to do my best to get the right basic structures in now, and then once everything is there, I can start to compare and contrast how things fit together. Now this eye that I'm drawing right here is way off. I can't see it well in the photo, and as I draw the next eye in, you're going to see that the angle of it is off, the size of it is off, the space that it's in is off.
Look how funky that is. It took everything in me to not go back and fix that, especially knowing that I was putting this video onto YouTube. But guess what? In the next section, I'm going to go in and fix all of that. And it's really important that I leave it there, even if I know it is wrong. Why do I put you through the torture of leaving this behind? You need to see the whole face together so you can make those comparisons to get things actually looking right. These are a good starting space. We'll go back in and make changes. You don't want to get stuck in the hole of erasing the same thing 20 times because it doesn't look right. It's not going to look right until everything's there anyways. So please trust me and my experience and the experience of hundreds of students that have come before you. Leave it there. We'll come back in later and fix it. As you're drawing, please make sure that you continue to draw really lightly so that we can come in and erase and get rid of the lines that are wrong later and draw successfully on top of it with our charcoal when it becomes time to add value and texture to our piece. Take your time, study, analyze. One little step at a time will lead to great success in the end on this piece. You've got this, my lovelies.